Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Change on the Run podcast, where we discuss common change challenges and ways to address them when you're short of time. And I'm your host, Phil Buckley. Today's topic is presenting at a leadership review meeting. Leaders can make or break the success of a big change initiative. They influence the levels of engagement of their teams, make the highest impact decisions, control the allocation of resources, and the ability to overcome barriers. Agenda, presentation style, data, insights, recommendations, and engagement levels all play roles in the successful leadership review presentation. So, how do you present at a leadership team review so leaders fulfill their roles to their full potential by making the best decisions that lead to successful transformations? And my guest today is John Millen. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Phil. I appreciate it.
John has over 20 years of communication, coaching, leadership training, and entrepreneurial experience. He is the founder of Reinvented Transformational Training, and his leadership roles at Fortune 100 companies have helped over 7,000 leaders be their best as they lead change. And John holds a BA Communications from California State University, Fullerton. So John, what's been your experience with presenting at leadership review meetings during change?
It's been a mixed kind of bag. As you noted, I do training and coaching. And with that, I'm constantly working with leaders who need to give these kinds of presentations. And, I work with CEOs, I work with public figures. And a couple of things I tell them, and I've also worked with, frontline managers. People are going in and being intimidated, going into big rooms where they go, how am I going to do this? And what I find works best, the common piece of advice I give, individuals or groups always right up front is stop giving presentations, start having conversations. It's interesting because I'll say that in front of the boss who, hired me to be there with all these people. I say, is it okay, Mary, if they stop giving presentations? Because nobody wants to hear a presentation. It's really just a mind shift, right? It's how do you change your mindset about things? Because when you give a presentation, you walk into a room, all the big shots are there. You feel this level of intimidation. Now, if you're giving a presentation, if you go in that room and you're giving a presentation, it means that you are the person that's being judged. When you are being judged, people look at you and they're like evaluating you. And in your own mind, you're thinking, oh my gosh, it's all on me. Now, when you go in there and have a conversation, it's on all of us. We're going to just talk. We're just going to talk about this subject, and we want to get opinions. We want to get kind of a dialogue going. And that's the difference. And once you have that mindset, everything else goes pretty well too, because in the room now, as I know in your great book, you've encouraged people to make sure that there is this kind of dialogue, that you've made sure everybody talks. And so when you come in with an attitude of we're going to have a conversation, then it's not on me, it's on you, it's on all of us. Let's get this going. And we start having that kind of conversation. The other thing that I found that is most effective for these presentations, and is a real piece of advice, like I tell everyone, it's a winner. And that is, I believe that 95% of the results that you get in that room are the result of what you did before you ever got there.
Oh, could you tell me more about that? Because I think it's a fascinating sort of flip of mind where, I know me within my career and a lot of other people, it's all about what happens in the room.
Absolutely. I that's why, again, I think that we create anxiety and lose confidence because we think this is that big moment. Oh no, this is it. I'm here in this room and it's a career maker or breaker. And it's really not that. Again, it's a conversation, but when all the work that you do beforehand, the preparation, the rehearsal, getting your messages right, like it's really easy, Phil, to go in and do a 2-hour data dump. You go in there, you got 100 slides. I'm just going to go through all these slides, click, 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 and you see all the data up here. And that's easy because all you have to do is run through it. A short presentation, a short talk takes much more work. When I work with leaders, a lot of analytical CEOs, a lot of analytical leaders everywhere, they're super smart people and they want to dump data on people. And what they really need to do is sit down and say, okay, what are sort of three messages you want to get across when you go into that room? What are the three things you're trying to say here? And then what's the one thing you want them to remember when you leave? That could be in the line of an objective to say, I want to make sure that we've all agreed that this is the course that we need to take for change, that this is the firm we've got to hire, that this is the new brand that we want to roll out, and get agreement on that stuff. And as you've prescribed to people in that great book is, let's get everybody talking about this. Let's lay all the objections on the table, make sure that everybody participates, because frankly, I mean, you get a better product from that if you air all that stuff out. But the other part of it is that you don't want anything left unsaid. Because some of the companies I've worked with, especially here in the Midwest, I live in Ohio. So I grew up in California. I work with clients all over. I'm in New York. Those are two contrasting styles. South is different in the United States. But in Ohio and Midwest, in some of the companies I worked with here, there's something called Midwest Nice. I think there's probably Canadian nice too, isn't there, Phil?
Canadian nice is very similar.
So people get in these meetings, they don't want to disagree. So they say, yeah, that's okay, fine, sure. And then they go out in the hallway and they go, I'm not going to do that. That'll never work. And so you want all that stuff aired out right there in the room and get that stuff out as much as possible. So when I say this again, the 95% results in the room, it's, have you done the preparation? Have you really boiled down those messages as much as possible so you know exactly what you want to convey and how you want to convey it? Have you rehearsed it so that people hear it and they say, well, no, don't say that. That's not right. Or you've got to work a little bit on this. The other thing is I said, bring a story. Like, find some stories, because stories are the most powerful things you can do. It's a leader's secret weapon in terms of getting influence, because as human beings, we're hardwired for stories. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But then finally, it's working the rounds. Like, you should not be surprised in a meeting that somebody says, I don't agree with this, because that means that you didn't do your homework. If you can't work with that leader, then work with their team, right? To get them on board, to make sure that you understand what the objections are, to try to mollify the objections there, or to at least get to a place where you understand what it is. And if they say it, you have some feedback on that and you know where they stand. But it's the other thing that makes you feel confident. Much more confident, because going into the room, I'm not going into a gauntlet. I'm not like going to have all these people attack me or say, reject it, because you kind of know what that is. And so it's a campaign, really, you're thinking of a change in particular. I know your focus is on change, and so many organizations are changing. So many clients are working on this. As you're moving forward to make this change, it's really a campaign you're thinking about winning. You've got to win heads, you've got to win hearts, and you've got to win hands. Right? You've got to get people, as you always talk about, Phil, is you've got to get people to actually change their behavior and do other things. So you start with, certainly with your leadership, you want to have the data available. You want to have selected data, not too much data, right? Not a data dump. You want to have stories which will appeal to emotions and bring people along and help them to understand what this means. And honestly, stories work so well, because when you think about it, you can present a ton of data to people and they won't be convinced. It's just not persuasive. It's, lots of people like to say, I'm rational, I make rational decisions. Human beings make emotional decisions. That's what we do. In sales, we've always known that over the years, right? You say, do people buy based on logic or emotion?
Isn't there some sort of statement about you buy on emotion, but you justify your emotions with logic or something like that? Or,
exactly right. Yeah.
But if you'd asked me, I would have said, no, I'm a rational being. I'm going to buy this TV or whatever, or I'm going to go ahead with this based on the logic of what it is. But
absolutely, we fool ourselves. I mean, so we used to say that. I know you've done sales training over the years.
Oh, yeah,
so
certainly.
Leadership is always about how do we influence people to change their thinking, change their attitudes, change their behavior.
But I think from what you're saying, it's really the story that the person that you're trying to inform, that resonates with them, that they can see that are supported by features and benefits. But it's really the story that's going to drive them to consider changing their views. Is that a fair kind of summary of it? That it is all about the story?
It's exactly right, because you could have a lot of data when you're going to leaders and you're talking about change in the industry, and you're more of an expert on this than I, but you have all this data about what other companies in your industry are doing and their need for change, but there's still this emotional resistance going on. But if you find a story about one of the companies that is so similar to ours, and they feared this change and they decided that we better do it because, we're going to lose in the future if we don't do this, and the company could close. So they took the chance and they did it, and they started moving forward. And it was a legacy company just like ours, and it was family owned, and it is. And then and you get an analogous story, and then you say, and look at them now. they are so far ahead of where they were. And it could be in another industry even, and bring over the analogy and say, look at the way that they turned, the way they changed. We can do that in our industry. We can change our company. We can change our future and protect it. And that makes a difference to people. And they just say, oh, and this is true in anything. If you're trying to sell somebody life insurance, if you're trying to get somebody to try new food, right? Like in your personal life and your business life, because telling a story of some kind of success is the way that people are hardwired. That's how we learn. That's why we're telling stories all the time to one another. We're telling stories to ourselves. That's the person we tell the most stories to about, I'm going to be good in this presentation. Or gosh, I always get nervous when I go do this. And so we listen to those stories constantly. And if you want to change the way that you handle the stuff, you just have to change the story for yourself, but also change the story for other people.
We talked about, being prepared and the makeup of that leadership team and how people have different interests. And once I was on a large change, and one of the leaders was kind of quite gregarious. And he goes, I'm not going to support this because my counterpart, who I don't like, it's his project. If you can imagine just, something so,
Wow.
brazen like that. But
Yeah.
I think it's a reality that there's, there's different interests, there's different, functional agendas. There's even different relationships in that group. And now you're coming in and you're speaking to this. It's not a homogeneous group. It's heterogeneous. How can you prepare to accommodate those different needs?
That's a really good question. So was the person in that story you told was the other person in the room?
No, but it was almost like it could have happened that way, because every time they were together, the more senior person went for the other person's throat, and again, on that edge, but was never a supporter. And the challenge is it was going to fail if we couldn't unlock that belief. And what I find in those cases, it's such a strong belief. The best you can do is neutralize it so that they won't, actively sabotage. But how do you deal with that situation where, just you're in the company and that, some people like other people, or maybe even, sales and marketing are kind of in their own group, and maybe the operations team has their own interests, but it's not a unified general management quorum. You're appealing to different people that all of them have to unite for you to be successful.
So a couple of approaches. Now, if you're a senior executive, I've seen this play itself out in very extreme levels. That's high levels and very extreme. We went through a transition. I worked through a transition for a CEO, and as the person came in the door, the situation inside the company was that there were two sides of the company, two big divisions. Each of them had convinced themselves that their leader, the president of those divisions, was going to become the new CEO. And they decided to go completely outside of that industry and find a new CEO that had no experience exactly in that industry, but had kind of relevant experience in a different paradigm. So the person comes in, and that was a shock to everyone. And here's a company that's used to fighting. They were fighting from both sides constantly to achieve dominance. It just didn't work. They were just not working with one another. So what he did was he went beyond the large, the high level SVP, the president, and the senior vice presidents and everything, and brought another level in of vice presidents and people who so made a broader camp, and probably had like 50 people, which hadn't been done before. And that was sort of his leadership circle immediately when he got there. And then he went through and said, so what are our values going forward? Let's get on the same page here, and produced a poster that said, and number one was, we work together, right? We work for the enterprise. Everybody was used to working for their business unit. And so this was kind of a unifying strategy, and had everybody, and he wrote these values down, and then he went and had everybody go sign that poster.
Wow.
And put it prominently in the offices so that everybody saw it. And really, in terms of consistency, once we sign a pledge, it's hard to say, like, I'm public. Hey, didn't you just sign that to say that you're going to work with me? Like, what? And so that's, one kind of strategy. But of course, he had the authority and he was up above. So now when you're coming in and these people don't have to respond to you and don't have to do what you say, you theoretically could say the other people didn't have to do what he said either, and you could have this rebellion. But there's underneath, we go into the situation. I think you have to just do the best you can, because people, and if you can, as you said, I think that's a great strategy, is to try to get to neutral. Like, don't have your expectations too high to say, I'm going to turn people's minds. I'm a charmer, or I'm like super persuasive. Like,
Right.
There's some people you're never going to convince. And It really speaks to me about, you do your preparation, you know what you're going in for, but then you also need to read the room. When you go into the
Right.
room, you say, you can look around the room, and sometimes life is like this. You'll find people that it kind of divides into thirds. So you have people who are, they hold views strongly on one side. There are, another third that's like strongly on the other side, because that's just where they find themselves. And then you have sort of the 30% in the middle, when you do that curve. And it could be that, it's 40%, 50% in the middle, and divides with the
Mhm.
edges otherwise. But you, in terms of persuasion and strategy, really trying to move people closer to the middle, into that area where they've have a semi-open mind. Can you move them in that direction? I think that's what you were talking about, is
Yeah.
really neutralizing their views on those things. Can I get you to not be hardline? I mean, my goal in some of this, for some of these people, is going to be persuade them and get them, make sure to reinforce their views, because they already are with me. There are others I want to move from the middle. But if there's somebody at the end, as you said, you really want to neutralize them. And that's like, can I just get you to have an open mind? Like, my goal might be to just persuade you to have an open mind on this question. And that appeals to people who's like, yeah, I'm an open-minded person, whether they are or not.
Wow.
That appeals to the value of, yeah, I'm open-minded person. So if I say, well, yeah, would you be open-minded? Would you just barely consider this? And if I get you on the record saying that, then you're in a position, again, you have to be consistent with what you said. You want to view yourself. Most of us, even people with these extreme views, they think that they're open-minded. They think, yeah, I got to this belief based on, evidence. But we all go through this. We create these beliefs based on our past experience, and they may or may not be valid, but to us they're valid, right? We think that we found the truth, even if we haven't. And so people are stuck with those beliefs, and you cannot pull people, in terms of influence persuasion. You can't yank somebody out from a lifelong or even a few year long belief. You have to ease them out of it, ease them out of that zone, so that they start to see something else is open. And then you hope that some of the other principles of persuasion will take over as well, of influence. You say,
Definitely.
if the group is all going this way, and you can get them into the group and feel comfortable with what the group is doing, that's sort of that herd mentality. It's really how do we draw people into that, and move them along the continuum of belief, and really coming to a decision that is the right thing to do.
Is there value in preparation for a leadership review meeting to even, list your assumptions and then just make sure that they're the right assumptions? That and an example would be that, oh, I've heard that the head of marketing isn't supporting this, but you have no data to support it. But, hey, I'm assuming this, so I'm almost, but maybe my assumption isn't right. Or, a leader doesn't care about the project, but, just because happenstance someone said that. Is there value in checking your own beliefs before you go to present to a leadership team?
That's great. I mean, the other thing I mentioned, and it fits with this, is earlier I talked about reading the room, and that's part of it. So thinking about your assumptions ahead of time. But then when you're in the room, there's so much information. If you look around a room and you can learn to look at body language, people will typically say, oh, somebody's got their arms crossed, so that means they're a closed body. Could be true. It's generally speaking, it can be, but you can also, you're getting all these other signals. So if you can learn to tune into that stuff, if you can learn to look at body language, facial expressions, the tone of what's going on, the tone you're getting from people, where people are even seated in a room, because you'll find people are sitting certain places because they want more power. You look at the dynamics of a room and how it's set up. Some of them are obvious. So if there's one, the leader is sitting at the other end of that rectangular table setting, then that person is saying, yeah, I'm top here. But it might be that there's some other leaders that are right along the side of that person.
Mm.
Who's closer to you? Depending on where you are, where should you sit in a room? It's a really good question, because if you want to take a power position, but you don't want to edge somebody else out of the seat who's going to be mad about that, but you want to be in a place that everyone can see you, and that you're going to be sort of well received, that you don't have to be turning your back to people, or you can constantly stay on the side, so that you want to work the power center, make sure that that who you decide are the leaders in there and who really need to be influenced, or maybe you already have support with the others, but you want to get after these people, then give them more attention, right? Give them more eye contact, more sense of focus. And then you turn around but that doesn't mean ignore other people, because you could lose other people too. So you want to make sure and scan the room and casually look around, jump to different faces, and you'll be able to tell if people are really with you or not. And if I see someone who's closing or closed off, I'll give them more attention, might ask them a question.
Right.
And I think that's valuable too, is that you can take some of the tension of, it's not about you and your presentation. So rather than you just sitting there, gosh, what's the next question coming up, and getting hammered with questions, instead thinking about like asking other people questions and asking them what's going on. I've had job interviews. I just find that if I can get the person talking, I'm asking them the questions, you'll leave. This happens. I've heard people say this about other candidates as well. The person's, you're asking them questions, they're talking, and then, you get through with the interview. They've gotten some stuff out of you, but they go, man, that person was so smart, or like, really, really tuned into the business. And because they heard themselves talking. It's like in sales, I do a lot of sales training. And
this
so
is great.
In sales, they'll say, if you're talking, then you're selling. If they're talking, then they're buying.
Wow.
It's because, it's way more important for us to listen and hear other people and what they have to say, and get that out of them. And again, that's why I say, if there are objections in the room, let that person air them, acknowledge them, get them out here. Some people are afraid that, that's going to change everything. It's going to change our whole platform or idea. But you want that. You want it to be modified. That's how you get to the place where you get the best idea, where you get the best initiative proposal, and where you also then pull people together so you have a kind of a unified front and not just, fragmentation everywhere.
And John, would you even recommend, it's such an interesting thought about, again, encouraging objections, very, very much of getting them out on the table. Would you set that expectation at the beginning and saying, I hope that, if you have any objections or if there's any concerns, that let's have a conversation now, because we all need to make sure that this is going to be the best for our organization. So I'd really appreciate your help in doing it. Like, would you almost
Absolutely.
give permission to do that?
100%. You want that. And the other thing that it does, it makes you seem much more open and confident, and, it sort of it gives you, I think, a little bit of the moral high ground, because it says, I'm about the purpose here, right? We're about this purpose. We all want to achieve something great. And it drives, as you say in your book, it drives them back to the vision, drives them back to the place where we have, we're understanding we have shared values here, and we want to bring those together, versus the idea that, this is my proposal. This is what I'm doing, and I got to keep this, and don't change it. Don't even look at it. Don't touch my stuff.
I think I lived 15 years of my career that way, but hopefully I've overcome it. Isn't it true though? It's, why does that happen though? Because so many people listening now, I can only imagine, are saying, well, yeah, I kind of been that way, or I've seen people be that way. It's mine. Yeah. And I just want it to be done, which I've failed when that has been my approach. Why are we encouraged to take on that view?
I think it's human nature. I think our ego gets involved. I think people get this concept in their head that, I'm going to be seen as a hero because I brought this whole thing and it's mine. Yeah. And the fact is that you are seen in a much better light if you are a person who can bring people together. That's the kind of leader you want to be, is bring people together, instead of one who has got to be the hero. And I drew the sword. We're doing all these metaphors today.
I've got the cape.
I pulled the sword out of the rock, and King Arthur. And that's not where we want to be. That's not and especially today, you and I had a little bit of talk beforehand about hierarchical leaders. And
yes.
And that's not today's leadership focus or style or what's effective today. We need to be, more than ever, we need to be open to ideas and bringing people along. And, we have these generational differences in the workplace. We have, and especially when we're talking about diversity and inclusion, and having this equity.
Definitely.
We want to make sure to have all the viewpoints, have something that works. And it works because I was open to everyone and brought something much better because of it, because we all work together. We got something much better out of this, rather than somebody's static view of what this should be. And then, I'm going to force it through the system and I'll be the hero. Right. And this will be it, and it might, and I say it as an individual, but it happens with teams too. It's like, wow, this is ours, and it's us against them, and they're trying to change it. So those people over there, that's what they do. the other division, the other
Yeah, certainly the
team.
siloed world that most organizational models are built on.
Absolutely right. And so, and we've got to bring it in. And I think the other thing to think about is also where you go on this very question. It's sort of the levels where we sometimes don't take other people's, opinions who are below, if you're doing the hierarchical
Surely.
model below, that people should, when they walk in a room like that, view these leaders as your equals. And I say that as well. It's like, you need to be on the same plane with them, because they will respect you more if you come at them with your honest opinions about things, with a sense that you're a leader too, and that we're all in this together. If you sort of kowtow, if you don't tell them the bad news, if you do
Yes.
things, you're inviting them to look down on you. You're inviting them to look at you in a slightly lower level, because you are doing that. So you need to raise yourself up and have that confidence and be there, and that can be effective. I always tell people that when you're going to do a presentation like this, when you're going into a big room, especially, that you should treat it like an athletic event, because too many people, like, you want to be your best
Right.
possible condition at that point, and not only physically but mentally. And so that's to say that, because lots of people will like, oh, I have a presentation at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning. Okay, well, how do I, so then they'll like work on the slides the night before. They run into the office when we were going to offices.
Yeah, certainly. I remember.
And I don't, but they like, and they call, and then they grab a cup of coffee, no breakfast, or they'll eat a donut and go in, and they did the sugar rush and they're done. And then suddenly, like 15 minutes in, they're starting to feel, I feel jittery. Like, oh man, maybe I'm messing this up. Maybe what's happening? And so I say, no, let's rewind all that. And so again, you prepared your messages, you know what you're doing, you got everything set. Now think about, like, get enough sleep.
Yes.
Make sure you've done it ahead of time, so you get enough sleep, that if you meditate. If you like to work out, go out in the morning and do something, walk or work out or something. I do this myself. Like, I'm at a hotel back when I used to travel. I get up early that morning and work out hard. And then when I go in, there's no nervousness, because I've burned off most of that.
Great tip.
And so you basically, how can you get your body and your mind to be where you're at your best self? You're in your best self. You're in the best mental state. You're in the best physical state, and you are showing up really strong at that moment. Because otherwise, your confidence, this sort of free floating anxiety, all that stuff happens, and it doesn't need to, because you've prepared yourself properly.
So many great tips. And again, I always reflect back, as I'm sure that listeners do, of, our own lives and falling into the trap of doing the all-nighter and then going in front of a leadership team meeting. Absolutely. And you're a wreck, but you convinced yourself that the one, the two more times that you rehearse at 3 a.m. is going to make you better, which sort of in the spirit of change on the run. And if you only had time to do one thing when you're presenting at a leadership team review meeting, and let's say it is something that you've been asked to do this because your boss is sick and you have to do it tomorrow, so time is an issue. What's the one thing that you would do to prepare yourself that would give you 80% of the results in 20% of the time?
The idea that you prepare, like, and think about this ahead of time, be strategic, kind of strategically prepare, right? So that therefore you make sure that you show up well, make sure you have your messages down, make sure you understand what's happening in that room before you get there. Like, who are these people and what are they trying to achieve? And just kind of lay the groundwork and then rehearse. And so I'm sorry, that's not one thing, but I'll just put it under the heading of prepare.
Yeah,
right?
No, this is great.
Because it's kind of all these tips, all these things that you use to kind of strategically set the groundwork, so that, because so many people think, I think that, again, from the beginning of our conversation here, is that it should be a conversation that we put too much weight on that moment in time. And I see this continually with every level of leader I work with. We think this is make or break. If I just get in that room and I gotta really shine, I gotta do my thing. Well, no, I mean, it's like anything else. So athletes, the best athletes, the legendary athletes that we know of, they prepare. They work super hard to get ready, all these hours, everything. And then when they get in the game, they let it go. They're not thinking about playing. They're not preparing for playing. They're playing. Right? You have to be in the moment in that, whatever you're doing. And so with a presentation, exactly the same thing. That is, you're not preparing for the presentation. You prepare for before you ever get there. But you go in you're not presenting. I'm not thinking about presenting. If I'm thinking about presenting, if I'm thinking about myself, I'm thinking about, all the stuff I've got to do, then that's not it. Then I'm losing. If I'm there to have a conversation with people, I've done all my preparation. I know the issues. I know what these people want. Then I can be present and I can just do my thing. When I do my public presentations and everything, I'm just training with, 80 people when we used to be in rooms, right? Like, I'm not using any notes. I have some slides, but the slides are just there. And this is an important thing for people to know too, is like the slides are just there to support you, right? They're there to support what you're saying. Don't make the slides the center of all this. Like, you should be the center. You conveying your message. You want people to watch you, and the slides are going to support what you're saying. But I just talk and obviously I've done it quite a lot, but it's there. Then it allows me to look at the people and understand what they're going through. And then I always say, just ask a question, come up with anything, and we'll deal with it. But the whole idea is that can you be present in the moment? And having done all the work beforehand is what allows you to be present in the moment. And that's what you should be doing when you're presenting at a leadership review.
And I'm just wondering, as we close off the show, is there kind of one insight or watch out or tip that you just say, as we close off to the listeners, from everything I've spoken about, or even other things, just remember this one thing as you're getting prepared to present, or even if you're in the moment in a leadership review meeting?
It's about the audience, not about you. That's it. Go in there and have a conversation with them. Don't focus and don't get out of your own head. It's not about you. It's about them. Not what you need to say. It's what they need to hear. What do they need?
John, thank you so much for being on the Change on the Run podcast. I really appreciate your perspectives. I know how many tips you've given in such a short time. So thank you. And how can people get in contact with you to continue that conversation or to get access to all the materials that I know that you offer for people?
Yeah, visit my website. It's johnmillen.com, MILLEN.com. I would love to hear from you. I'm on LinkedIn as John Millen as well.
Great. Certainly. And I highly recommend that your newsletter, as well as I know that your podcast has kicked off. So great conversations there too. So thank you so much again for being on the show. And thanks to you for listening. And the Change on the Run book and audiobook are available now. So you can check them out at changeontherun.com or your favorite bookseller. And until the next time, I wish you all the best as you continue to lead change.